I'm going to walk through a simple example of how to use Master Combat Tool. So first, we're gonna create a simple damage graphic using the Master Combat Tool. So first, we're gonna use this simple damage formula, which is the attack power multiplied 100 and divide the defense power plus 100. So we're gonna create an attribute variable represents the attack power from the attacker. We're gonna collect the dealer entity to it, which represents the attacker. Now we're gonna multiply it by 100 with the mass root, which is multiply, connect here to A, connect this one to B. And we're going to create an attribute variable represents the defense power of the victim. We connect the target entity to it, and a mass root, which is AND, we share the same 100 loop here. Now we're going to use the first value we got to divide the second one. Now the result gonna be the final damage. Now let's enter condition, compare this value with 0, and select the measure as greater and a trigger. So basically the actions will only be triggered if this damage is greater than 0. So that's gonna save some performance. Now we create the action node and select attribute change as a type. Connect target entity to it. For the attribute UID, we're going to use say HP, which is the current HP. And we're gonna use final damage we calculated just now for the attribute value and select the operation to subtract. So that is done. We're going to test it in the demo. Now we're going to select the weapon of the player and add the combat damage component to it. Select the graphic object we just created to here and enable the physics detection. In this example, we're just going to use the trigger collider and select layer mask, which is this one I'm using the demo. We're gonna input the attack filter for the enemy here. We don't have colliders and riggy body on this game object, so we're gonna click the auto effects. We just added a box collider here. We're gonna adjust the size to roughly match the weapon. Now let's apply the prefab and test in the game. You can see whenever my weapon touches the enemy, it's gonna be hurt. To bind the damage with the animation, we're going to disable this enable damage option. And in our control script, we're gonna reference this combat damage script and set it to enable whenever the animation is playing the attack clip. So I have an attack animation clip and I added animation event to it called sword damage enable and pass through a multiplier. And in this event, I set the sword damage script, which is a combat damage component we just added. I call it to set enable for 0.1 seconds. Now let's figure out how to apply this multiplier to it so that different attack animation can deal different damage. We go back to the visual graph window and we're gonna create a dynamic variable input a UID here. Let's call it multiplier and we set the default value to 1 and we're gonna multiply this value with the final damage number and replace it of the original value we used. Now let's go back to the sword game object. We selected inspector. We see there is a dynamic variable called multiplier and the default is 1. Now in the script, we can set the dynamic variable with the UID, which is multiplier, and with the float value we got from the animation event. That is done. Now let's go back to the visual graph window. Other than just dealing the damage, we can also do some interesting things. For example, we can create a racial impact prefab by the position of the target. And we're gonna input the prefab name here, HVFX, and check the set active. And we can also play a song, input the audio clip name here, add a little bit delay to it. And on top of that, we're going to send a message to victim, so it's gonna play a hurt animation. We put the message function name is unhit, and we can also pass the final damage along with this event. There is a lot of things Master Combat Core can do, but that's it for our simple example today. Thank you for watching my video.